Well, good afternoon and welcome to day 3 of the Bipartisan Policy Center's Solutions Summit. As those who have been watching know, we are here to pursue the fierce urgency of pragmatism and try to uncover some opportunities where our new president and incoming Congress could actually find common ground and put some wins on the board for the American people. Today, we are focusing on the topic of rewarding work, which has taken on new dynamic importance, recognizing what the country is going through. And we are fortunate to have 3 leaders with us who can help us understand one of the really key questions, which is how do we reemploy millions of Americans, recognizing that many will have jobs that don't return. We're fortunate that our leaders today are not just theorists, but folks who have real experience on the ground in terms of the needs of businesses, workers, and their communities. Today, we're going to focus a lot on an innovative apprenticeship program in Chicago, which if scaled, we think could really be the key to kind of restoring the diversity and dynamism of a workforce to help us recover. So I'm going to do some quick introductions of our panelists, and then we'll get rolling. First, Julie Sweet, who is the CEO of Accenture since 2019. Prior to this post, Julie had a number of positions in the company, including general counsel and CEO of the North American operation. She is the chair of the Business Roundtable Technology Policy Panel. And just earlier this year, Fortune magazine correctly named Julie as the #1 most powerful woman in business. So delighted to have you with us and good to see you. Greg Case has served as the CEO of Aon since 2005. Under Greg's leadership and kind of bold vision, Aon has become a much greater global company, providing a tremendous amount of service to a diversity of clients. Prior to joining Aon, Greg was the lead of the global insurance and financial services practice at McKinsey, and he is consistently named to be one of the most top effective CEOs by Harvard Business Review. Last, certainly not least, Secretary Penny Pritzker, who is an entrepreneur, a civic leader, and a philanthropist. She was the U.S. Secretary of Commerce in 2013 to 2017, where she was a key member of the Obama economic team. Relevant to today's discussion, under Penny's leadership, the Department of Commerce broadly engaged, really for the first time, in issues around workforce skilling and opportunity. And in addition to all of her government work, she is a philanthropist. Along with her husband, Dr. Brian Traubert, they created a significant foundation that focuses on economic opportunity for working families in Chicago. So it is a all-star team, and I am going to just jump right in and I guess probably start off, Greg and Julie, with a question for the two of you, which is, you both run large global organizations. Every day, I hear a different story about where the economy is. Just to get us kind of going, just some general thoughts, Greg, on what is the economy that the country and the next administration is going to discover early next year?
Well, Jason, I don't know that I have a crystal ball into it. I see what I see every day, as Julie does too, and Penny as well. Not just in the U.S., but around the world. This is still a very interconnected global economy. One observation I would just highlight, we've all been through the challenges of the pandemic. They've been difficult. But through that, time and time again, we do see resilience in every way, shape, or form. I'll just tell you, with Julie's help and others, we formed a little coalition and convened a work, travel, convene coalition in cities around the world: Chicago, New York, London, Madrid, Singapore. Coming through that was this notion that everybody talks about the new normal. And the new normal wasn't good enough. New normal was corrosive. New normal was, we were going to go back and accept something not as good. And so the group really started thinking about the new better. And the new better is not easier. It's not easier, but it means we're connecting and interacting in ways that can be more effective, like we are today, and in being able to do that more effectively. So I would just highlight, a level of resilience that through it all says there's real opportunity. We'll be connected in the U.S. and globally, but the opportunity is really tremendous, and we're seeing it come through really in cities around the world. And so hopefully, under the new administration, together, we carve this path in a more effective way. So just one thought on this idea of new better versus new normal.
So Julie, add your thoughts to the new better. Where are the places that Accenture is seeing real opportunity for recovery and growth?
Of course, industry plays a big role in it, right? So if you're in travel and hospitality, there's estimates that it'll take anywhere from 2023 to 2026. But I would say, and there's a million surveys out there, but you may have seen the Business Roundtable, the confidence, their quarterly CEO survey just came out yesterday, and the confidence spiked. I just came from a roundtable with 10 CEOs, both US and European, given the time zone. And what I would say is there's a lot of confidence now, which is really important. I mean, there's realism about, the pace and, based on industries, you're going to have it. But, even as I look at our European business, despite the second wave, there's this focus on light at the end of the tunnel. I need to be positioned, capturing opportunities now. And it is a different feel 9 months in. And I think, of course, some of the things, what's happening with the vaccine is also giving some impetus behind that. So, and I know that we all know that when you have confidence, that's where you continue to see the investment. And so overall, I feel pretty good given what we've been through, kind of where we are now looking forward. But there's a lot that has to be done, to your point around policy. I mean, 83% of the Business Roundtable, when their survey said, what is the most important for President-elect Biden? And it's absolutely the stimulus. So there's a lot of things we could collectively get wrong. And it's going to be really important in the next few months ahead.
So let's start to turn into the workforce question. And Penny, I'll come to you. The pandemic is accelerating a lot of dynamics that were already underway and kind of reshaping the demands on the American workforce. What are some of the trends that I think you were seeing, obviously, as we began the year? And what do you think has been the kind of response in terms of how we engage this very significant and new dynamic?
Well, I think one of the trends, there's no question that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on communities of color. And as a result, I think we have to be very intentional about our response as we address these inequities. If you think about it from a public sector standpoint, governments should really target populations that have been hurt most. And I think that means we need to use data to know where to direct our social service support. And I think the federal government has to step up their support of states, because the states really do have a much better sense of where the challenges are and who's really been most negatively impacted. And I will put in a plug here for what Julie said about the stimulus. The jobs report did come out, the most recent jobs report. And if you actually look beneath it, the recovery's slowing right now. And so, and you're seeing again, the same groups that are being impacted. Black unemployment's over 10%. We've lost 700,000 teachers since 2019. So I think there's a real opportunity, a bipartisan opportunity, for Congress to come together and invest in our people, invest in our small businesses, invest in our engines of growth around innovation and R&D, workforce adaptation, infrastructure, both physical and digital infrastructure, because we are seeing that's another trend you're seeing that's been really had a flash, had a big light shown on it, which is that digital access and digital affordability is quite inequitable. It's not just a rural challenge, it's also an urban challenge. I think, another thing that I am seeing as a trend, though, on the positive side, is you're seeing the private sector, companies like Aon and Accenture, working to hire more people of color, working to reach out to not only make sure that there's good jobs available with good wages, but what's happening with wealth accumulation? What are we doing with our supply chains to make sure that there's a fair access to the spend that we as large companies have? And in the non-profit sector, what you're seeing as a trend is really a movement towards a COVID relief and COVID response, and trying to be focused on our most disproportionately impacted communities. So, a lot of very positive things are happening. we'll get into skills and workforce development in a minute, because that's a big story of where positive things are happening.
All right, well, let's get there right now, because I think this, Chicago Apprentice Network is pretty inspired. And I guess I also feel like it does a lot, to your point, in terms of reimagining the talent pool. And I want to lead off recognizing that, while this is something really good for the country, this isn't altruism, right? The companies online here entered this discussion because you need workers for the next century. And I wonder, maybe, Greg, if you and Julie would both talk a little bit about the program, but also what the workforce needs you have as a company, and a little bit about your company as we look to the future. And Greg, why don't you lead off?
All right, terrific. Happy to. But really, this has been very much a team effort. It's been a real pleasure to partner with Julie and Accenture and the team. And I'll tell you, Jason, it starts back in 2017. We're looking for ways to really bring talent into our firms. And we focused on communities of color, as Penny has described. And we started this idea of an apprenticeship program. And were there ways to create access for groups of individuals that heretofore we really hadn't had access to? And initially, Jason, we need to do this. It's fundamental to our business. It's very important that we have a more diverse talent and capability in our firms, and we haven't succeeded at the pace we wanted to. And we originally started with city colleges and other sources as well. And we realized they didn't have access to us, but really, Jason, we didn't have access to them. And as this group started to come in, we realized this is truly an unmatched pool of talent. Before, we'd always thought, this is if I could put it in crass terms, a supply challenge. If we could just train, this group of colleagues, then opportunities will open up. What Julie and I talk often about is it's not a supply challenge. It's a demand challenge. It's essentially us, Julie and I, our chief people officers, actually opening up our firms to see opportunity in talent in a different form. And it turns out, when we started to do that, the real beneficiary, obviously the apprentices, we hope had a great experience, the community, great experience, but the real beneficiaries were us. These colleagues have come in and done amazing work in meaningful roles and progressed in the firm. And we also realized it's not about one firm, one company, it's a network. And the more we networked with JP Morgan Chase or with Walgreens and, just McDonald's, you started to see a network built. So not only were we benefiting from apprentices coming into our firms, our companies, they were benefiting by seeing each other around Chicago in this network. And, we've grown from 2 or 3 companies starting this program to now 40 plus companies, 750 plus apprentices a year, and they see each other in terms of this opportunity. So that was the beginning. Julie and I both see opportunity vastly beyond Chicago, and the opportunity, there's great initiatives around the US around this, but this fundamental idea that this apprenticeship idea is a really demand. It means we need to get up and do things differently to make it happen, we being the leadership of companies. And in doing so, the real beneficiary will be not just the apprentices, but the companies, as we've seen. Julie, what are your thoughts?
I would absolutely, echo what you described. And I think a couple of important lessons is that, in the Chicago apprenticeship, you'll notice there's no company names, right? This isn't the Aon Accenture network. This is the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. It reflects also what Penny said, which is state and local know what the demand and the supply and and how to do the interventions. We partner in the network with a lot of not-for-profits who help many of these young men and women and learn how to actually operate in different environments than they have had before. It's a really important partnership. So I would say scale matters from coming together. And we were very purposeful about not making this about any company. You've got competitors who are working together to create apprenticeships. And, I challenge my own organization and CEOs to ask the question when someone says, I want to invest in the community or do something, the first question should be, who else is doing it? And that we've talked for years about the silos, that we all work together in the same communities doing many things. I do believe that the COVID has really put more of an emphasis now on working together, but that is also CEO led, because otherwise you get a lot of things and a lot of names of individual companies and you don't get scale. And that's absolutely critical scale. So the scale matters, local. And then I just want to go back to your first question about the economy. I will tell you, as a global company, if you look at Asia, they're recovering faster, they're more resilient, they're increasing their competitiveness because of it. Much of the impetus, besides our own talent, as to why we started this a few years ago, was we truly believe that to be competitive as a country, we have to bring all of our people along. We need to have digital literacy. We have to invest in all of our people. And is, I think it's never been more important than right now. And you're going to see, some interesting developments from a competitive perspective if we don't act quickly over the next 12 to 24 months. Thank you.
So Penny, I think the theme collaboration is clearly important in this apprenticeship. And if we're going to have a whole of society approach, you've done a little bit of everything. Business leader, government leader, philanthropic leader. How do you see the kind of fullness of the Chicago community coming together around these ideas? Where are the opportunities for public, private, and philanthropic collaboration?
Well, I think what we have to do is build upon what Greg and Julie began, and we need to continue to go to scale. We have 750 apprenticeships. I remember the first year, I think we had 40 or 50, and so we've made enormous progress, and our foundation's been very involved in this effort since the beginning, because this is an area I'm personally very passionate about, and as Secretary of Commerce, I appreciated that in order to actually have the opportunities for the companies to appreciate that there are young people out there that they're not seeing as potential employees, and for the young people to be connected with those companies, took this kind of collaborative effort that only companies like Aon and Accenture could actually catalyze because they're sizable enough. Now the opportunity is to take the 40 companies and continue to grow it, and so that we have thousands of young people a year, and that the Apprenticeship 2020 already is seen as an opportunity pipeline for young people, and that more and more companies and more chief people officers understand the benefit of this kind of pipeline of individuals. It's a virtuous cycle, if you will. And to me, I think scale is really important. We as a country, and Julie and Greg know this, if we had the same number of apprenticeships in the United States as Germany does per population, we'd be at 6 or 7 million apprentices a year. And I think we're somewhere around 1 million or 1.5 million, maybe at most. So we have and what we've learned is apprenticeships can be across the entire spectrum of the workforce. And so there's an enormous opportunity for us to take the ideas and the successes that are going on locally and take them not across our country, but also scale them in the places where they're at.
All right, scale, scale, scale. I guess this is where I want to kind of probably draw towards a close, and that is to ask, Julie and Greg. So, how do we go 10x? How do we supercharge this effort? And in particular, what should the government not do? And are there opportunities that you think where you could see federal government or state governments kind of facilitating a rapid, acceleration of the program?
Julie, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, first of all, it's not just about government. As Penny said, her foundation's been involved from the beginning, and Penny's been an advisor bringing together. And this really is government, private sector, foundations, and other not-for-profits that we have to come together. And I think the important thing is to recognize that and to get that sort of scaled collaboration. Also, the humility to learn. One of the things we've done is try to say, look, here's how every company, even small companies now have IT, and we've literally just shared, here's the IT roles that we believe are, great for apprenticeships. We've helped develop curriculum. We said it should go any place. And so I think this idea of humility to learn, willingness to be transparent and share, is, really critical. And then we need a bigger ambition. Right. And, Greg has been leading the way in terms of expanding kind of what we're doing here, but we need a bigger ambition in Chicago as well. And so all of those of you listening who want to join, because we have to, look, these are the apprenticeships that are not trade apprenticeships. These are breaking ground. And we've learned a lot, and we're ready to scale and go even bigger with this base. And so we need to set our ambition. Greg?
Greg, we can't go home, so we got to go big. What do you want to do?
Well, we gotta go big, but I think Julie and Penny have captured it very well. And particularly around this idea of this is all of us together. This is not any individual, not a company. This is, as Julie described, well, this is a network. What Penny has been able to help us do in Chicago, enormous, and it really is public-private together. But I would just highlight two things. Again, for those listening, when you think about 10X, think about the following. The energy behind this isn't a push effort. This isn't let's try harder. If we help companies understand the opportunity, the energy behind this is demand pull. As you started, Jason, this is not sort of a feel-good thing. This is the power of inclusion and how you operationalize that and make it happen. Apprenticeships are a vehicle to do that. When companies understand that the way Julie and I have experienced it, you want to make this happen. You want to see this go 10X. You realize, by the way, working with city colleges, they were magnificent. They've shaped their curriculum, their program to really sort of, mesh in terms of what we're trying to do. This whole public-private partnership piece to make this happen, absolutely essential. But the fundamental driver is this is demand pull. This is not us trying to push this rock uphill. This is about helping companies understand the nature of the possibility here. And when we do that, this is going to create this opportunity, Jason, you're describing. And Julie's right. 750 years, not nearly enough in Chicago. But the concept is getting more and more proven. How do we scale it across Chicago? And how do we scale it across the country, as Julie and others are doing? We have a commitment. We're going to try to go 7 cities plus. Julie's at the forefront, working across, all of the U.S. and sort of capturing what's going on globally as well. So I just highlight, spend time and understand the nature of this opportunity. And it truly is a win-win-win. It's a win for the community. It's a win for the apprentice, but it's really a win as well for all of us who want to capture the power of inclusion to do what we want to do and build our businesses.
That's great. Penny, I'd like you to kind of give us a final word. What's your kind of closing thought that you'd like the audience to take away from this opportunity?
My closing thought is really 2 points. First point is you do not, as a CEO or as a chief people person, have to invent the wheel here. We have created a process. We have created learnings. You can adopt what we've learned here in Chicago and get the benefit of our years of effort here very quickly. The second thing is that it takes a team. It does, in order to actually create the kind of pipeline that we're talking about, it does take cooperation and collaboration between the business community, where the demand is, between the community colleges and local training organizations, and the student pipeline. And we all exist. We all desire the outcome. It requires us to work together. Those pipes have been put in place, and now it's an opportunity for others to join in so we can go to scale. So thank you.
Well, you have set the example and laid down a challenge, and I really greatly appreciate the work you did and sharing it with us today. I now have the great pleasure of turning this over to my colleague, Jason Fickner, who is going to lead our final panel today.
Thank you, Jason. My name is Jason Fickner, and I'm a fellow here at the Bipartisan Policy Center. The topic of today's panel is rewarding work and developing politically viable solutions to the barriers many people experience in gaining employment and advancing in today's economy. Today we have with us Isabel Sawhill, Charmaine Yost, and Adrian Schweer. Dr. Sawhill is a senior fellow in economic studies at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Yost is a vice president of the Heritage Foundation, where she leads the Institute for Family, Community, and Opportunity. And Adrian Schweer is my colleague here at BPC, where she serves as a fellow and leads BPC's Paid Family Leave Task Force. Their full bios are available on the BPC website. Welcome and thank you for being here today. Let me begin the discussion by asking each of you to take 3 to 4 minutes and provide some context on what barriers you think are holding people back from participating in the labor force, or even if they are working, what barriers might be preventing people from advancing up the income ladder and having more personally and financially rewarding work, and then offer some policy solutions. Let's start with you first, Belle, and then Charmaine, and then we'll go to Adrian. Belle?
Jason, thanks so much for including me, and also for all the work that you and your colleagues have done in your new paper on working family agendas. I like the focus on policies that have bipartisan support and on policies that can be enacted relatively quickly. And I think all the topics you cover are terrific, but you asked me for my top priorities and what I think the barriers are. And I would make a big distinction between short-run priorities and longer-run priorities. In the short run, I would think we have got to support family incomes by boosting wages or providing other supports as long as the pandemic lasts. And that can mean a more robust safety net, amongst other things. And I'm very hopeful that Congress will include such supports in the relief package now under consideration. And I'm very glad that it's bipartisan and that we seem to be making a lot of progress there. I do wish the package included more support for states and localities, because during a period when they are going to be under and already are under severe stress and are going to be responsible for vaccinating all of us, they simply don't have the resources to get the job done, not just the vaccination job. So to some of the longer term issues, I would give equal weight to doing two things. First, I think it's just critical to improve the skill level of the workforce. And second, I think we do need to boost wages. On the first item, I want to introduce one fact that I think really brings the problem or the barriers home, at least to me. If you look at all 17 to 24-year-olds in the United States, only 29% of them would be eligible to join the military even if they wanted to. So almost a third of all of our young people aren't eligible even to join the military. Their problems or barriers include a lack of education and training, but also things like drug use, criminal records, obesity, and mental health problems. So I think we need a lot more emphasis on preparing young people for both adulthood and for careers. And I think that should include a lot more emphasis than we have right now on career and technical education and apprenticeships. I was so glad to hear the CEOs on
She's frozen. Well, let me take this time to switch over real quick to Charmaine then, because Belle mentioned military, and your son's in the military, and it didn't occur to me that so many people would be ineligible to be in the military based on qualifications.
Yeah, no, I
Right.
think that's not
you're
my
back.
side. That's all right.
Sorry, but we lost you for a minute, but go ahead and continue.
I noticed that in your new report, you do suggest expanding Pell Grants for short-term occupation-oriented credentials, and I think that's probably a good idea. I think community colleges also need more resources, as well as these kinds of partnerships that the CEOs describe. On the wage front, the data show that wages have simply not kept pace with productivity growth, that labor share of total income and profits or revenues has declined, and that male wages in particular have stagnated and actually declined for the least educated. So here I do support expanding the earned income tax credit to childless individuals, but I support, which you talked about in your report, but I also support a couple of other things. First of all, I think we do need an increase in the minimum wage. At the federal level, it's $7.25 right now. I would increase it to at least $12 an hour. Second, and this is a really important issue, and again, it came up in the last panel, we need tax breaks for businesses that are training their workers and are sharing profits with them, sharing profits more broadly than right now. There's a real tendency for those of us in the policy community to focus excessively on government programs rather than on what the private sector is doing. In my last book, I had a whole chapter on the role of the private sector in this arena, and I discovered in doing research for it that actually there are what you could call high road employers and low road employers. And the high road employers, such as the ones we just heard from, are doing a terrific job of reaching out and training workers, including those from less advantaged groups and minority groups. And that can make a huge difference. And since 85% of jobs and income are in the private sector, if we don't change private sector practices, we're not going to make a lot of progress just using government programs. And there's no reason why this has to be inconsistent with making profits and returning fair share to shareholders. In fact, research by McKinsey and other groups has shown that the two are not inconsistent at all. So I'll stop there because I want to hear what other people think. But thanks again.
Thanks, Bill. Charmaine?
Well, thank you, Jason. And let me add my thanks that Bell has already expressed to the Bipartisan Policy Center for putting this panel together. I've really been looking forward to it. And I too enjoyed very much reading your report and going through some of the other materials that we circulated amongst ourselves. I think one of the reasons that this panel is particularly interesting to me and why I appreciate your bipartisan approach is that the Venn diagram amongst the three of us of things that we agree on is really fascinating. And so that to me provides a lot of optimism for moving forward. And it's particularly fascinating to me for Belle and I to be on this panel together, because even were she not on this panel, I would probably still hit several of the points that I want to make that emphasize areas of agreement. In my 3 minutes, I want to make three hopefully quick points. The first is I want to kick off talking about the success sequence, which Belle knows very, very well because it started with her. Second, I want to hit on education. And thirdly, I want to wrap up talking about regulations real quickly. So I start with the success sequence. And Belle, I don't think I've had a chance to tell you that this is something that we within the Institute for Family, Community, and Opportunity have been looking at a lot this last year. And in fact, we went out into the field and did focus groups and surveys to look at how this current generation is looking at the success sequence. For any of our listeners or viewers who are not familiar with it, the success sequence is a concept that Belle herself wrote about, I believe about a decade ago, that outlined the fact that if young people follow a success sequence of graduating from high school, getting a job, getting married, and then having children in that sequence, they can reduce their probability of ending up in poverty by down to about 2 or 3%. And this concept over the decade that Belle and others have been, including our friend Brad Wilcox down at the University of Virginia, have been writing about it, it's always intrigued me because it is so unusual in the world of public policy to find a concept that has such agreement across a right-left continuum. Obviously, there are differences in maybe how to talk about we think the ramifications of that are. There are some differences in terms of maybe an emphasis between how Belle and I look at this, but it's fascinating. And one of the reasons that we are wanting to pick this up and talk more about it, it's really was, I think, absolutely devastating and catastrophic from a cultural policy perspective when the data came out just this summer indicating that the U.S. marriage rate has dropped to the lowest that it has ever been since we started keeping these statistics in 1867. marriage is just really very much on the decline, despite the fact that a decade, 2 decades ago, we started talking about and developing this right-left consensus on how important it is for families. Now, I need to move a little bit more quickly. Why am I starting here and talking about work? And it's because I would argue to you that in terms of the success sequence, this is the core building block around which the others move us forward. That young people need that foundation. We had a really impressive couple come speak. Sharpelle Welch from Shreveport, Louisiana, came and spoke to our anti-poverty forum this past year. She talked about the fact that in terms of working with young people in lower income and lower resource communities, these kids don't have as much of a resource to stand on in terms of getting into the workplace. I think this is common sense that we all know. And so I want to reemphasize that this is something, picking up on the point, Belle, that you just made, is I think it gets lost in the conversation frequently from a federal policy perspective, because it is very much of a cultural conversation. But despite the fact that that is a challenge for us as policymakers, that it lives very largely within the cultural realm, within the personal realm, we can't lose sight of the fact that this is, and there are some policies, like, for example, the marriage tax penalty, that are simple things that we should be, or not so simple, but specific things that we can continue to address. Then moving on to education, I want to bring education up in this context because, again, this is an area where Belle and I agree, and I was really glad, and coincidentally, that we didn't compare notes ahead of time, but that you put this on the table as well. I think if you went to the man on the street and said, hey, how many people, what is the percentage of people who go to college in the United States of America? Very, very few people would get it correct. And yet only about 34% of Americans over the age of 25 have a bachelor's degree or higher. The number of people who attempt college and are not able to complete, only 40% of students finish in 4 years, 60% finish in 6 years. We need to have a real conversation about our persistent emphasis on college as the pathway to success. What are we doing to talk about the 70% of Americans who don't have college degrees and who have different aspirations that are perfectly acceptable and, in fact, adaptive to their goals and life and aspirations? We can do a much better job of paying attention to how our high schools are feeding kids into tech and vocational kinds of education. That's a conversation that we need to be paying more attention to. And then finally, let me talk a little bit about regulations particularly as we head into a post-COVID economy. We had a wonderful example, a wonderful negative example, actually, of how badly regulation hurts us in the workplace with the original response to the coronavirus, when we were not able to get tests stood up as quickly as we needed to as a country. And a large part of it was regulatory barriers. Once we got those regulatory barriers cleared out of the way and some of the other problems addressed, we were able to move much more quickly and in much more of the innovative pace that Americans are used to. And so that's ultimately a success story, but it could have gone faster and it should have gone faster. And I think we want to pay attention to that as we look at how we should be keeping and making permanent some of the regulatory relief that we've seen in the workplace. And in particular, I want to use that as a bridge to talk a little bit about the challenges with childcare. I know we're going to talk more about this throughout our half hour together, but since 2015, the number of small in-house providers of childcare has decreased by half. And as we look at how badly the coronavirus has affected female workers, we want to be very serious about asking questions about why some of the kinds of healthcare that people express in polling data time and time again is their preference, why that's becoming in shorter supply. And we know for a fact that one of the reasons is an overregulation. And I'll go ahead and be provocative and say there's so much that I liked about the report that you all put out this last week, but I would disagree with the assertion that we need to be having increasing college education among childcare providers. This is exactly the kind of regulatory approach to trying to boost the supply of childcare that we want to move in the opposite direction from, taking regulation and intervention into the market for childcare. We need to decrease that rather than elevate it. And with that, I'll stop and look forward to hearing from you, Adrian, and having our conversation as the half hour goes on.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. And I think it is important to point out there's a lot of overlap right now between the two of you. And I think that's a good segue to go to Adrian as well. So Adrian?
Well, I'll just start by saying it warms my bipartisan heart to hear about all of this overlap. And I wish we could do more of this to celebrate the areas of synergy and opportunity. And as we see a Congress with smaller margins in both chambers, we have tremendous opportunity to work these synergies and these opportunities and move things forward for workers and for their families. And I think that's really exciting. I think you've both covered a lot, so I'll try and be really quick with a couple of things that stand out to me. The first is, I dream of a post-COVID economy, but I think we're far away from it. And we have a pretty challenged workforce, specifically pretty challenged working families in this COVID environment, and we're not meeting their needs. And I'll humanize it for just a second, because the other day I met this wonderful woman named Shay, who's a very young mother of 3. And her temporary job is helping take COVID specimen swabs, the really upper nasal one that goes right to the brain. And she's so good at it. She has kids of her own, and she did so well with kids. She had a 6-week-old baby at home, and that is her job. And she was proud of her job, and she worked hard, but she was really scared in her work every day. And there are a lot of people right now that are in those situations. And I think ending that last portion from Charmaine talking about childcare brings me to thinking about a childcare spectrum that goes that 0 to 5 range. And there is tremendous bipartisan support for a paid family leave proposal, in particular around paid parental leave. And I wish Shay would have had a federal paid family leave program that could have met her needs and kept her home with that beautiful baby. And so I think with working families right now, 40% of workers have children in the home. Many of them don't have the opportunity to work from home like so many of us. Many of those of us who do have the opportunity to work from home are pressured with closed schools that still haven't reopened, and children at home managing virtual or homeschooling like in my house, and with a lack of childcare, a lack of accessible childcare. And I think that post-COVID economy feels really far away, even with the vaccine on the horizon. And there's a lot of policies that we could put in place, whether it's this potential bipartisan COVID relief package, or in January as we're thinking about rebuild, that could really meet the needs of working families. And the other thing that I'd elevate that both Belle and Charmaine touched on is that we have a huge chasm for working women right now, and we're seeing that in our data numbers on who's leaving the workforce. We found that people in our research at BPC, we found that people on UI are 2/3 more likely to go back to work if they know that they have paid leave to help manage some of their caregiving responsibilities. We also found that 1/4 of all women who have left work during COVID left to manage their caregiving responsibilities. And it's my sincere hope that school will be back and we'll be able to increase both access and quality of childcare in the next year. But we probably have a lot of rebuild, and I'd love to see policies that really meet the needs of working parents.
Thanks, Adrian. I'm going to use sort of moderator's prerogative, because the 3 of you touched on a very important overlap, which is paid leave, parental leave, childcare issues. And as we start talking about some bipartisan solutions that could be done in 2021, we also have to keep in mind that, of course, we're in a pandemic, and some of the temporary provisions that Congress passed expire at the end of the month, including some paid leave provisions. So maybe you can comment, and I'll start with you, Belle, about the importance of paid leave, whether we should extend the temporary provisions, make them permanent, and how do we do something for childcare? Because I think, as Adrian pointed out, this is becoming sort of a bifurcated economy where you sort of feel like we're going in a direction where there's going to be people who have childcare needs and people who don't. And that's going to lead to a different sort of economy for people. And to Charmaine's point, maybe it's not having childcare workers have college degrees, but this goes back now to the apprenticeships. Maybe there's a better way to train them to have a difference in how we allocate supply and demand for childcare. So let me start with you, Belle, then go back to Charmaine.
Well, I'm glad we covered those topics because I couldn't cover everything in my initial talk. So I'm a big advocate for both childcare and paid leave to enable people to handle the work-family balance more humanely than they have to do right now. We're doing a lot of work on that at Brookings. I've also been the co-director of a 4-year project on paid leave with some colleagues at AEI. And our working group as part of that project did come out with a proposal for paid parental leave. We're a very diverse group, and we were not able to get huge agreement around paid leave for medical care and for care of a elderly relative or a sick spouse or whatever. And but we have now just put out 2 volumes very recently with new research on both the need for medical leave. I'm not talking about sick leave, which is typically short term. I'm talking about, if you break your leg or you have COVID and you need a few months off. And we have a whole volume on that, and we have a whole another volume on caregiving leave. So I think that we need a extension of FCRA. I always forget what it stands for. It's the acronym for what was in the original CARES Act.
Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
Thank you. I think that should be expanded at least until COVID is over. I think thinking about the structure of a program after that is a little more complicated, and we probably don't have time to get into right now. On childcare needs, I think a lot of childcare needs could be handled if we did 2 things. One had universal pre-K, which I think is desirable for other reasons, for both 3 and 4-year-olds. And secondly, if we aligned school hours with work hours much better than we do now. In a little book that I just put out with Richard Reeves, we call for doing that, and we think there needs to be more discussion of that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do things like expand child care subsidies so that everybody has access to them. And the BPC, the Bipartisan Policy Center report that just came out, you point out that eligibility for the existing programs is relatively low. So yes, these are really important issues. If I could just have one more second, I've got so much I want to say. On the apprenticeship issue, I think we do have really bipartisan agreement on that. And one of the things that the CEOs touched on, and I want to really emphasize, is we need to extend apprenticeships to non-traditional sectors, to services. They've typically been in the trades, in manufacturing. Imagine if you could have apprenticeships for caregiving work, for example, or for many other jobs in the service sector. We really need that, in my view.
So Charmaine, I want to turn to you. Thank you, Belle. Charmaine, I want to turn to you, and partly when you've done research on this, your dissertation was on the Family Medical Leave Act and trying to level the playing field for parental leave. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. And also, how would you, as a conservative, how do you speak to conservatives to get them on board that this is a bipartisan thing we should do and the importance of it?
Oh, terrific. Thanks. Let me pick up first on this question of kind of a broad one that Adrian mentioned. Adrian, you're exactly right, unfortunately, that the post-corona economy looks like it's a little ways down the road for us. And the reason I start with that is because I think that we have to stay focused on a conversation that acknowledges that at the end of the day, all of these different solutions and reactions that we come up with are on the margin and are more emergency related and don't actually solve the fundamental problem of getting people back to work. You know, there's just sometimes I just feel this great sorrow when I hear us talking about, you know, $1,000 here for this relief package for an individual. And I just think, wow, that just doesn't go very far for working families who are struggling to make ends meet. It's certainly at the small business owner who's watching the cratering of their entire life's work. So we have to stay really focused. And that brings me back to the regulatory questions, because in order to get us all back to work, our argument at Foundation is we've really got to focus on getting people tested and having easy, fast, at-home testing. The technology is there. The ability, the capability is there. The FDA has got to really put the pedal down, get it approved, and we've got to focus on using that as a technology and a way to getting people back to work. So with that as a setting, I'll segue back over to paid leave. Let me be really clear. At Heritage Foundation, we think paid leave is a good thing. And when you look at the expansion of paid leave in corporate America over the last decade, that's a very good thing. So nothing I say following this should undermine the fact that we think benefits that large employers or even small employers give to their employees and their workers, it's a good thing. But my concern, and this was borne out in the research that I did as the director of the Paid Family Leave Project at the University of Virginia, is that there can be this idea that it's almost if this is the singular bullet that we're talking about, and it becomes a mandate for companies to give to their employees, it's one piece of a puzzle, and it only applies to and addresses the concerns of a limited universe of people. So we prefer a more cafeteria-based approach that, what about your workers who don't need leave? What about a family who's decided to have one parent stay at home with the child, and so you're offering them paid leave when in fact they would prefer a different benefit that would be of more benefit to their particular family? And research has shown in the European context that paid leave policies can be regressive and of more benefit to upper income families than the lower income ones, where candidly these are the ones that we really want to be helping. And so this is what brings me back to saying, let's be focused on, instead of a narrow agenda on something that doesn't holistically address the concerns of families who are struggling. I would argue to you, I know, Adrian, we share a concern about the women who've been so deeply impacted by this pandemic. I think a possible positive coming out of the experience that we've all had this year is an emphasis on flexibility, an emphasis on, there's been so many pieces already written, and I expect there to be more in the coming year of this surprise at how much flexibility has worked, how much work from home has worked. We joke a lot about Zoom, but look at what we're doing here today. This is fantastic, and we all do need to get back to more in-person interaction. But I think the forced focus on a flexibility and the ability to do more work at home is something that female workers in particular have been telling pollsters for decades that they were interested in. And I think if that carries us into 2021 in the future, I think that'll be a very good thing.
Excellent points. We only have about
points. I want to jump in with one thing, Jason, because the way you said the extension of emergency paid leave flagged for me one other thing we all agree on, which is that it is not the permanent solution. The way that it's designed is not going to solve the needs of people in the future. I think we all agree with that. So I just wanted to pipe in with that one piece. But there has not been enough bipartisan collaboration on paid leave, on childcare, there actually has been quite some beautiful on apprenticeship, but maybe not meeting the needs of other sectors, as Belle put it forward. But that's what our opportunity is this year. It's to create space and allow members of Congress to really work across the aisle to tackle some of these tough issues in an imperfect way, but allow for great good to not be the enemy of great and leave space for some compromise in these places so we can meet the needs of workers, get them back to work, help support them and their families in a better way, and ensure that 2021 and beyond, whatever this post-COVID economy could potentially look like, is better suited for the worker, and in particular for the working family that frankly is our future and who we really want to not just survive this environment and this day, but really thrive in the future to help support a better America.
Can I jump in, Jason, because I have so much I want to add to this conversation.
Well, we have about 2 minutes, Belle, so I'll ask you to make it short.
Okay. First of all, virtually all of the increase in middle class incomes since 1980 is due to the fact that women have gone to work and contributed to family income, which is one reason it's just crazy not to provide more child care and more paid leave. Secondly, I do agree with the idea of a cafeteria approach, or at least a more choice. In our latest book, we call for 20 days of paid leave for everyone for any purpose. And finally, I just want to say that the flexibility issue is huge. We've been doing focus groups and interviews with middle-class families all across the country last year, and what came up over and over again is their need for more flexibility and more advance notice about what their work schedule is going to be.
I appreciate that, Belle. Thank you. So I have to start wrapping this up, unfortunately. This is one of those conversations where, again, I wish we had multiple hours just to go through. I have so many more questions I want to ask you. Belle has some ideas about, service for community and how people could donate their time to do public service, and that would help pay for college. We talked about apprenticeships, EITC, Pell Grants. There's a lot out there to removing barriers to work, and especially helping women. And I think it's also important to note, and I'll wrap this up then, that all three of you really hit home the importance of having women in the workforce, both to expanding middle-class lifestyles. As Belle pointed out, the increase in women's participation in the labor force has helped middle-class incomes grow, and the need to support women in the workforce. And that also would apply also to men who are caregiving and have parental leave needs as well. And so I hope at some point the Bipartisan Policy Center can call on the three of you to come back again and help us try to push these provisions forward in a bipartisan manner, because they really are important. And it's not just a temporary solution we need, it's a permanent one. So I thank the three of you for your time. Let me wrap up. Thank you all in the audience for joining us for this important conversation on rewarding work by removing barriers to labor force participation, shared prosperity, and opportunity. Our week-long Solution Summit is focused on identifying policy areas where the new administration and Congress can make progress early in 2021. It's important that proposed solutions have bipartisan support, and we saw that here today. Please join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern for a webinar on boosting financial resiliency for U.S. workers. Our expert panelists will look at the future of financial resiliency through the lens of workers' careers and how public policy can play a key role in improving outcomes. You can find more information on the BPC website. Thank you again to the panelists, and thank you for the audience for joining us. Take care.